Welcome, everyone. Steve Scarborough here. I'm here with Mrs. Diane Janosek today from the Women in Cybersecurity, and we're going to be talking about critical infrastructure and where she sees us in the U.S. nowadays, and some of the initiatives she started and is working towards. So welcome, Ms. Janosek.
Thank you so much. You can call me Diane.
Diane.
Yeah, that's good.
A little informal formalism. So. Go ahead, could you tell us what you've been working on lately? I understand that you've started the Women in Cybersecurity Critical Infrastructure piece.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, I love it. So that's one of my pet passions. So thank you for letting me mention that. So the Women in Cybersecurity is a national organization. Actually, they're international. And I started one of the first affiliates in the Mid-Atlantic region. But then during COVID, what I ended up doing, which was exciting, because they always say start something new when we had extra time to think about it, I started, along with Dr. Brad Sims, the president of Capital Tech University, the Critical Infrastructure Affiliate or community. So it's really to get women that are working across all critical infrastructure sectors in the cyber part of it to come together and really share lessons learned, what's going on, different even job opportunities. And IntelliGenesis has actually been really helpful in helping us start that, as well as with Hack the Airport that's coming up. So the cyber and the intersection with critical infrastructure, with operational technologies and ICS and SCADA, that is a huge threat to our country. So nothing could be more important. So it's a big passion of mine.
We're really excited about the Capture the Flag event coming up at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
month. We just had a meeting today with everybody trying to add some more pieces into it. I think it's going to be really cool. I think all the participants are going to be really happy about it. We'll be doing some training and stuff that evening.
So I had already heard from some of the women that hadn't done it before and how excited they are. So it's the goal is to increase participation in the field, and then also those, especially females that are in the field, keep them in the field and keep getting their interests higher and higher and more engaged. So it's a wonderful opportunity for the CTFs and the different hacking events that we have.
I think it's really awesome too that you've not sectioned off, but really called out the critical infrastructure piece. Like the work we've been doing over the past year or so and trying to ramp up, where we're working here with the IG Labs and some other things, and it's really getting people to understand the criticality behind critical infrastructure. We take so many things for granted, and we don't really pay attention to those little things until something happens. And thankfully, there hasn't been anything too catastrophic yet. But we're trying to get people to understand where we need to be at before that really happens. Is there anything that stands out in the recent events that you really have drawn your attention, and you think really you're pushing the group towards be like, hey, we really need to be looking at this piece?
Well, thanks for that, for asking about that. So the biggest thing that probably came that really got folks interested in saying what's going on is the ransomware attack on the Colonial pipeline. That was a big deal. That was part of the gas and the transportation industry. It really created a major bottleneck, on the East Coast for sure, in terms of the ability and access to gasoline and fuel and energy. So that really raised the bar in terms of heightened awareness. Like cybersecurity really affects economic security, national security, homeland security, defense. So that was a big event, but I thought I might just back up just a minute to define kind of critical infrastructure, if that's okay. Just in case some folks aren't, what is that about? So, with 9/11, they did the 9/11 Commission, and they established the Department of Homeland Security, and they also established the Director of National Intelligence. So they created 16 agencies that make up the intelligence community for the country in terms of our national security. And then they also have Department of Homeland Security, which is for kind of our homeland defense. So they pulled different components of the executive branch and pulled them together, and then they created the Department of Homeland Security and the Secretary of Homeland Security. And now and as part of that, in the last year, they've created as a subsidiary, a federal agency, CISA, the Critical Infrastructure and Security Agency underneath DHS. So why am I saying all that? It's because in the United States, and then this is and then the Department of Homeland Security, actually under President Obama, issued an order that there were 16 sectors in the United States that need to be deemed critical infrastructure. So you're like, well, what is critical infrastructure, and how do you actually explain that? So They haven't. You can Google it and it will tell you that there's 16 sectors, and it includes the financial sector, the healthcare sector, transportation, energy, defense, intel, telecommunications. So there's 16 of them, and so they all play a role. But the reason why United States is so different, this is why I just love the United States of America, is because 60 to 80% of that infrastructure is owned by the private sector, right? We're a capitalist society, we're democratic, we have three branches of government that's only at the federal level. There's a whole bunch of other components that make it a little bit more challenging to implement an edict. Like some of the other countries that are adversaries can issue an edict and lock down whole networks. Well, we're not that, and we don't want to be that. So how do you overcome something like the Colonial pipeline ransomware attack, or how do you overcome what I was going to talk about a little bit, if we have time now, was what happened in February of this year with a fairly small water treatment plant and a cyber attack that happened there.
Yeah.
But that should scare all of us, right? That if someone can actually hack into your water treatment plant, change the chemical makeup, and all of a sudden you're drinking corrosive chemicals and no one knows about it, that's pretty significant. So is that homeland security? Is that economic security? Is that national, is it an intelligence issue? Or is it, personal, like healthcare issue? So it crosses a lot of lines, in the United States, which means we really have to come together, because there's no one forcing function to make us work. So I thought I could talk about what happened in February in terms of, and how that makes us different as a country, and then how that actually raises the obligations for ourselves as professionals in the cybersecurity field.
I think that's one of the things was amazed me, is how quickly it faded from the spotlight. Both the attack on the water plant in Florida and the Colonial pipeline attack. Mm-hmm. It was there. It had major impacts. And they kind of faded away with the news cycles. And again, it goes back into like the subconscious. We just take all these critical pieces that are running the country that we depend on a daily basis, and it just fades it back. And like I was saying, like thankfully nothing major has happened where we have loss of life, but just being prepared for that piece and having people realize, that these things are what make us, a whole country, and allow us to do a lot of different things regardless of political parties or anything else.
Right.
It's like it's a critical. We have to have that. That's a foundational thing to the operation of the nation.
Yeah, and that's why I think I just love cybersecurity professionals, is because they really understand that they're adding value to our country. It really makes a difference, and we really affect daily lives. And it affects whether how you go to the ATM, how you get gas out of a gas tank, how does your IoT refrigerator may work, how does your Ring doorbell working or not working, how does is your healthcare data private, when you go visit the doctor. I mean, every single part of our life is connected. And so I think as Americans, people are hoping that the cybersecurity professionals are kind of have it together. And they're saying, I hope you got it together. And so it's our job, to make it work, right? So I feel like a higher obligation, all of us in cybersecurity field have a bond. I mean, I really find that the cybersecurity professionals, just the community is very strong, because that's such a big challenge. We're not competing with each other.
No.
Because it's just too big. So we have to work together, and I think that's what makes it so collaborative, and because we have a lot to do and we can't do it alone. So I think it's a fun community.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I found like when we're talking about people that are in the traditional IT cybersecurity, and we start exposing them to like the critical infrastructure pieces, that really sparks their interest too, and they're like, oh wait a second, there's this other piece behind the traditional IT infrastructure, domain controllers and email server and the web servers, that there's all this other stuff, and they also not just like the networking side, and there's all this communication, how the PLCs are working and how the IoT devices. It's like an elevated technical challenge that a lot of them, that's why we get into the field. It's a technical challenge, and now there's another layer to it, and you're just like, oh, I want to go there and play with that and learn that and defend it and all those other pieces. You wanted to talk about what happened in February?
Sure, that's great. So I agree with you. There's just there's a lot of layers in cybersecurity, and I think that's what makes it so fun, because you just have to keep learning, keep being inquisitive, and just doing a lot of forensics and just questioning and how things come together. So back in February, a lot of the folks probably remember, but they may not remember, fades away. But back on February 5th, there was a hacking event of a small water treatment plant. It was in Oldsmar, Florida. I don't even know where that was. It's Pinellas County, I think is how they pronounce it, near Tampa Bay. And it was very basic, very rudimentary, but there was an individual that was sitting there, physically there, not remote, and he noticed that when looking at the screen, you know how all people looking at the screen, the engineer was looking at the screen, and he noticed that one of the parameters for one of the chemicals for lye, LYE, had been changed, and he was like, that's really weird. So he went back, and he thought just must have been a mistake from one of his colleagues or whoever, so he changed it. That was at 8:30 in the morning. Didn't think much of it, but then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is what they're saying is kind of rudimentary, they actually saw his mouse move like on the screen, and he's like, well, that's kind of not very sophisticated, but the individual changed the lye from 100 parts per million to 11,100 parts per million, so over a factor of 100. So lye is a sodium hydroxide. It controls acidity of the water. It's really corrosive. It's usually in like household items, you know what I mean? So you don't want to be drinking that. So the engineer thought about it and said, okay, I reversed it back again. And he kind of let a couple people know and didn't really think too much necessarily of it, but let people know. Then he told supervisory train, and then I guess they started thinking, well, maybe there's an issue here. So they called in like their local legislative folks. They actually had gotten in touch with Senator Rubio. Senator Rubio asked to bring in the FBI, like saying, hey, what is this? Yeah. So even though it wasn't that sophisticated, it was really concerning because we've seen water treatment plant happened in the Middle East. Last year there was 2 different ones that happened there. One was for agriculture and one was for drinking water. So we knew that they can do it, but we've never seen it in the US before. So that got a lot of folks pretty freaked out that it was happening here in the US. And so there was a number of things that they looked at from a technology, process, people perspective, what went well and what didn't go well. Right. And I could talk a little bit about that if there's time. But then also, who's manning this? Like who actually has the responsibility? So I can talk a little bit about that as well. I don't know where you want to take it.
Absolutely. We want to hear your perspective on what that event occurred, or not really how it occurred, but the takeaways from it. What were the operators doing, and what could they have done better? Some of the sophistication, some of the things we're seeing in our research is it's the same thing we saw in like traditional IT infrastructure. Improper password setting, default passwords, the things that we are just like have been hammered into us all these years, and we look at the critical infrastructure piece, and those same mistakes are there too, and it's just like. But when we talk to the operators, they're like, well, my IT guy is in another office, and we really don't talk about securing this piece. So
that is we did not pre-coordinate. That's exactly what happened in this particular case. So the engineer was not the cyber guy, but if I could just back up for a second. So as I mentioned back with Homeland Security, put out the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. One is water. So under water, the EPA put out guidelines and said to all the water treatment plants in the country, there's 50,000 of them, hey, we want you to take a look at these cybersecurity guidelines and fix your water treatment plants. They saw what happened in the Middle East, they took a look at it. But in reality, 40,000 of those 50,000 water treatment companies didn't have to do it because they served less than 3,000 people. So then you're only looking at 10,000. And of those 10,000, guess how many actually did the review of their systems?
I don't even want to guess. It's probably very, very low.
Yeah, less than 10. And it just so happens this little guy down in Oldsmar, Florida was one of them. So they actually did the work, but then they didn't actually remediate anything. So, they get a plus for being one of 50,000, a few 50,000 actually doing it, which is, I do give them credit for that. That they said, okay, we're going to do this, but they had another year or two to implement controls. But once again, there was no one with a big hammer, and people are drinking this water, so you're hoping someone with a hammer is going to be like, hey, pay attention. So they knew that they had some challenges, but they hadn't fixed anything. So what really happened with this event was that because of COVID, right, they went to a much more remote so the engineers could work from home and manage the water treatment. So it turns out that they went to, just like what you said, it was, they all had TeamViewer remote access. They used the same password. They had 32-bit version of Windows 7 operating system, and it was connected to the internet without firewall protection. So the engineers are not cybersecurity engineers, so none of this stuff was actually done that was figured out, was identified as being how to have vulnerability. So at least it was on their radar, but probably what happened is it could have been an insider, right, that they knew that they had the password. It turns out later that there was some research that was done, and it said that back in May of 2020, Intel, so this was the year before, Intel 471 noted that someone was trying to sell access to a water treatment plant in Florida. So somebody knew that they had the credentials to remote access in, and they were trying to sell them, and they didn't sell them. But then finally, I guess maybe they did sell them to this unsophisticated attacker. So my guess is it probably was an insider, right, that knew that and was trying to kind of make it profitable for themselves, and was getting, a little bit struggling there. But so they ended up probably making a little bit of money, but they did get caught, and it was reversed, and there was no harm done. Right. What they said from a technical perspective, which we all hope companies have, is something an alarm would go, or something like, hey, ding, 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 like there's something that's way too high, you're gonna kill somebody if they drink it. Apparently that didn't go off, but they said it would have gone off in about 24 hours. So this is all, and this is real, right? I mean, we're Americans. You give water to your pets and your babies and your, your little children, your, elderly and, adults and everybody. So it makes a difference to have good health care. I mean, good, healthy water. So in that respect, I think that, some kudos to the company that they were trying to be remote because of COVID, they tried to do the assessment, but then they didn't follow it up with actually doing, the right technology work, fixing everything, get everything back to where it was supposed to go. So it did alarm a lot of folks. So CISA put out a guidance the very following week and said to critical infrastructure operators, please, please, please replace Windows 7 if you haven't done it. So it really does come back to, cybersecurity often comes back to money, right? Because these old systems are legacy, and it's a major event to redo, up everything. Right. So you know what it's like. So
we see operators all the time. They're just like, it's working. I don't want to touch it. It's going to break if we try to change it, or it's going to cost us. You can't even patch it. It's going to break if we patch it. So we're just not going to patch it and take the risk on it. So I think that's the challenge, for cybersecurity professionals, is that we know we're not always the most popular because of things that we have to offer up, and we know the risks. So we're like, it's hard to sleep at night. But you want to keep plugging away, making a difference. I think that's one big thing too, is like you were saying, is like, it's not an easy thing to go into some place and tell them you have to plug these holes, or you can't have these certain accesses, so you makes it easy from working home because of all these other things. But I think we really look at it like, we don't want to just give the keys to a bomb away or anything else. It's the same thing. We don't want to give the keys away to a water supply, and it can potentially affect thousands upon thousands of people.
A whole electrical grid, so we're so connected. So you hit the nail on the head. So you get it. So thank you for doing what you're doing. We appreciate you.
It's those little things, and you mentioned like the power grid, seeing what happened with weather events down in Texas, and then the whole microgrid around Texas, and how it's interconnected and how it drives life. And I mean, just all these little things, just we don't think about and take for granted on a daily basis. Even as, and again, we know cybersecurity professionals that don't really think about it until we expose them to it, and they're like, oh, okay. And owner operators don't think about it, and the implementers and designers of these systems, we see them all the time where they're running on Windows CE, and you can get into the HMI and then exit out into a full Windows environment with zero passwords or zero checks. And designers of the 24-hour alarm, it's designed to go off in 24 hours. But that's, as a threat, I've done my research and potentially know I've got 24 hours to do something before I set an alarm off. So maybe that alarm needs to be adjusted closer to the event time. So going back and and
Yeah.
influencing the entire chain
Yeah.
is really.
And even if they can think about it as a physical security thing, so in the big mansions they have those alarm systems, right? And so I know someone whose house was broken into and through the roof, and the person knew that they had so much time before the alarm went off, so they got out. The robbers got out, before the police showed up because they knew how much time they had. So cybersecurity, criminals. Our cyber criminals are going to know the same thing. Like, I've got so much time to get in and get out. So I think keeps us on our toes anyway.
It's exciting. I
Yeah.
mean, I really enjoy it,
Yeah.
moving from the traditional IT security
Yeah.
to doing cyber physical things and understanding all the criticality. And again, it's a huge technical challenge.
Yeah.
And my empathy to everybody in this environment trying to figure it out, and the owner operators and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
It's not an easy task to try and secure it, but I'm glad we're having these discussions now, and it's actually being elevated to a different level.
Yeah, so I just want to thank all of your listeners that do cybersecurity or support the cybersecurity industry.
Yeah.
You're making a difference. The United States needs you. We value your opinion. We value the collaboration that you have and your new ideas and the innovation. And so it's just all coming together. And so and it's the only way that we're going to survive. As a country, we have a lot of adversaries, very sophisticated adversaries. So we need all hands on deck from academia and government and private industry from all different walks of different sectors to come together. So I love this community. So thanks to your listeners. Thanks for what IntelliGenesis does. Just thanks for supporting, women in cybersecurity critical infrastructure community. That's just been great. And the CTFs and the Hack the Buildings and Hack the Airport events. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for being here and talking with us today. And thank you for actually setting up the Women in Cybersecurity Critical Infrastructure piece. We have a lot of women here at the company and stuff, and we're seeing a lot more interest from them and their friends and the environment and coming in and learning. I think it's great that you set that up and get more all hands on deck, as we used to say in the military.
Everyone wants to belong and be a part of something. So we'd love to have you, join us. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for being here and
Okay,
discussing
thank you.
critical infrastructure with us today, and it was great having you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.